if you have, this is the height of this bar is the intensity, and that's about 60% effort, and I put 150 minutes max on a long run. You know, I argue with people about that all the time. All kinds of people with the Leukemia Society who are slow. They're 6- and 7-hour marathoners, and they've got a coach that tells them they've got to do some 20-mile training runs in order to complete a marathon. I don't like that. I don't think you have to do a 20-mile training run to complete a marathon. I would rather say, let's do 150 minutes as a max. That's enough for me, 2.5 hours. I'd rather have you get hurt completing the marathon than get hurt training for it. Because they only have 17 weeks. And you take somebody who's never run, and in 17 weeks you're going to make them do some 20-mile training runs? Let's ask Ryan Hall if he does 40-mile training runs. No way. But he would cover 40 miles in 4 hours. And these slow people would take 4 hours to do a 20-mile training run. So why should they be working harder than the best we got? That doesn't make any sense. I finally had one coach say, I know why we have to do 20-mile training runs to complete a marathon, because it's got a 2 in it. And 26 has a 2 in it. Well, I found out that 12 also has a 2 in it. So now I got an answer for that. I didn't used to. So this is what threshold running looks like. It's a little more intense, but you might do 20-minute bouts, or you might do a series of cruise intervals. Interval training looks like this. You work hard, you rest. You work hard, you rest. So it's about equal amounts of rest and work alternate. Interval training is very, I think, poorly defined. People, they don't know what interval training means. So I wrote an article on it one time, and I defined it very specifically. Interval training involves intermittent work and rest. Everybody agrees with that part. That's what interval training means, is you work and you rest, or work and recover, whatever you want to call it. But they don't have any other definitions. How long are the work bouts supposed to be? I say the longest is 5 minutes. Because remember, when you're running an interval pace, that's a speed you could race at for about 11 minutes. You can't go out and do 8, 10-minute intervals, because you're racing 8 times. So we limit it to 5-minute max. It might be only 1 or 2 minutes, but it might be 3 or 4. And then we make the recovery equal to or a little less than the duration of the work bouts. So if you're doing 3-minute work bouts, we're resting 2 minutes. If you're doing 4-minute work bouts, we're resting 3 minutes. So I'd make it very specific. No work bout can be longer than 5 minutes. They can be shorter. And the rest is equal to or a little shorter than the work of the work bout. And the amount you do is no more than 8% of your weekly mileage. Right there, 8%, or no more than 10K, whichever comes first. So in an interval session, if you're doing 40 miles a week, I will let you do 3.2 miles worth of intervals. Because that's 8% of your weekly mileage. If you're doing 60 miles a week, you can do 4.8 miles worth of intervals. If you're doing 80 miles a week, you can't do more than 10K, because 8 times 8% of 80 is 6.4, and that's more than 10K. So I limit it to the lesser of 8% of your weekly mileage and 10K. In threshold, I limit it to 10% of your weekly mileage. But I put a minimum on cruise intervals of 4 miles. I mean, if you can handle a 3-mile tempo run, you ought to be able to handle 4 1-mile runs. That shouldn't be that tough. And then repetition is higher speed, bigger rest. Higher speed, bigger rest. And the duration of these work bouts is no longer than 2 minutes. And the rest is about a 3-to-1 ratio. You rest about 2 or 3 times as much as you work. Because what's the purpose of the repetition? Economy and speed. And how in the world are you going to improve economy and speed if you don't rest long enough to feel good when you're doing it? You know, a lot of coaches would say, well, if a good workout is 10 400s at 70 with 3 minutes rest, it's a better workout to do 10 400s at 70 with only 2 minutes rest. And I could argue it's a worse workout. Because if cutting the rest makes you sloppy during the run, because you're not recovered enough to run with good mechanics, you're not going to improve economy. And all the distance runners get all over the sprinters in the track, and they say, oh, you guys ran 1.5 miles today, we ran 8 miles. Well, that's because they ran fast and they had to rest a lot. So a lot of their time was spent recovering so they could run fast again. You can't run fast if you don't rest in between. So you got to say, what's the purpose of the workout? The purpose of this is to improve speed and economy. And you can't do that by running long work bouts or reducing the work or rest time. So each one of those has a purpose. And this is just a little more of it on easy runs, and I think I mentioned this. You're running at about 60 to 75% of your fraction of max, or max heart rate, only about 65 to 80% of your max heart rate while you're running easy. And threshold or marathon pace would be a little higher intensity. Threshold pace would be a little higher intensity. Interval pace would be right close to 100% of max. And I'll show you a slide why I don't say more than 100% of max. And there's no heart rate or associated with repetition because it's beyond your max. But it's such short work bouts that you're not working that hard. Anyway, and this I've already talked about. I won't even go over it again. Here's a very interesting thing about intervals that you should understand. Let's say your interval pace is 5:30. That represents your VO2 max. And you're going to do some 5-minute runs at that speed to improve your VO2 max. You improve your VO2 max by running at your VO2 max. Not beyond it. I mean, beyond it can improve it, but no better than running at it. So here's your oxygen consumption. You take off running at a 5:30 mile pace, and your VO2 goes up here, and it levels off at your VO2 max, and it takes about 2 minutes to get there. So in a 5-minute run, you spend 3 minutes at your max. Okay, so by running one 5-minute run at your max, you get 3 minutes of stressing your aerobic power. Now, let's say you're all psyched up, and you run the first one at 5:20 pace instead of 5:30. Well, that's beyond your max. So your VO2 goes up here and levels off at your max, because you can't go above your max. So after 2 minutes you're at your max, you get 3 minutes at your max. Same as you got running 5:30 pace. But because you ran the first one too fast, you might make the second one at the right pace, so you got 6 minutes at your max. But because the first two killed you, you might run the next 3 at 5:40 pace, and here's the cost of 5:40 pace. Your VO2 goes up and levels off at 5:40 pace, and you get no time to your max. You might be hurting. You might be working as hard as you can, but you're not running fast enough to be working at your VO2 max. So if you did that, you get 6 minutes at your max by doing 5-5-minute runs. But if you'd done 5 of them at 5:30 pace, you'd have gotten 15 minutes at your max. Running too fast is not going to get it done for you. Unless the purpose of the workout is to hurt. You got to answer that question. What's the purpose of this workout? Is it to work at your max, or is it to hurt? And if it's to hurt, then run way too fast. Early, particularly the early ones. Then you'll stagger all the rest of the day. And I guess you can justify that sometimes. I don't know.